My name is Timothy Alcorn, and I have Alex Lee here. And so, Alex, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. My name is Alex Lee. I grew up here in the South Bay in Milpitas and San Jose, and I'm running for California's Assembly District 25.
Perfect. So we're here. We're at our respected homes doing this. We were planning on doing like a little podcast at a film studio, but in light of the recent shelter-in-place orders, we're going to make do with the great technology that we have. So, Alex, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself personally, different hobbies, things you like to do, where you grew up, stuff like that.
Yeah. So outside the realm of politics, one of my hobbies that kind of include things, especially like hiking. So actually today I took a nice long hike in the Sunol Regional Wilderness, and I heard today that Governor Newsom is probably going to close a lot of state parks starting tomorrow. So maybe the county parks are going to close soon too. So thankfully I got a good last hike in. It's really good to clear your thoughts, get your exercise and everything, and that's really what I enjoy. Also like things like photography, especially nature photography. So those go hand in hand. But I grew up right here in the South Bay, in Milpitas and San Jose. I went to Milpitas public schools. I went to Senate, Rancho, and Milpitas High School. It's actually where I know Tim from. That's really cool. From Milpitas High School back in those days. So yeah, it's my kind of background nutshell. I've also worked in both houses of the state legislature, in California state legislature, in the Senate and the Assembly as legislative staff. And up there in Sacramento and also in district level, I got up and close and personal and know what kind of representation I think our district is lacking. And that really inspired me to run when the opportunity came to run. And well, now I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but
Real quick,
yes.
Those people who don't know when you say when the opportunity came, because as some people in the political world know this, but this was actually a very special opportunity to kind of get involved. So you want to explain what you mean by this opportunity? Because, there's elections every few years with this. So what do you mean by this opportunity?
Yeah. So the incumbent Assemblymember Chu, he decided instead of rerunning for election, as you do every 2 years, he decided to run for county supervisor instead, thus vacating his seat for the state assembly. He also did this at a unconventional kind of time. He did it in, I think, May of 2019. So usually people, if they make their decisions, they make it way in advance. He did it kind of late in the game. So yeah, then he'd announced that seat would be open. Is my dog barking really loud?
Yeah, it's okay.
That's why I paused.
The shelter at home risk that you take.
That's the thing. Hold on. Yeah, so Assemblymember Chu, he announced in May that he was running for county supervisor of Santa Clara County, and that vacated his seat for the state assembly, and it became an open seat. And then I had a lot of folks who I know from all across California. They're saying you should think about running. You should go for it. And at that time, I was only 23 years old. I'm 24 now, and I will be 25, hopefully if we win. But I was 23 years old thinking, wow, really? Should I run? It's kind of a daunting task, and, we ended up doing it. And just recently, we declared victory in the California primary, too. So we actually won the primary election and are going to be moving on to the November election.
Well, nice. That's pretty cool. Yeah, so you're kind of like the young kid who kind of came from nowhere, like not from, you came from here, which is like one of the best places ever, but you came out of nowhere. Not many people kind of knew who you were until this campaign. So I have a lot of questions here, but since this topic, how do you explain winning the primary when you kind of came out of nowhere? Like what'd you do? How'd you get your name out there? How'd you convince all those people to vote for you? Because there's a lot of candidates. And there are some candidates who spent a insane amount of money. We're not going to name any names here, but they spent like so much money. And a lot of the times, and this does apply to local politics as well, but a lot of the times, money is kind of the name of the game when it comes to campaigns. Like if you got money, you have a high chance of winning because you can afford all the signs, all the events, all the mailers, because mailers are huge in the campaign. So. I know you ran kind of like a grassroots, not kind of, you did run a grassroots campaign. And so how do you kind of explain how you kind of won the primary, the Democratic side of the primary, with all of these other Democrats running.
Yeah. So definitely, we had a crowded field, right? We had eight Democrats total running. I'm included in them. 8 Democrats run for State Assembly 25, District 25, and yes, it's true. There was a lot of money stacked up against us. I think in total, if we added it all up, it's probably north of 15-1 we're outspent. So we were vastly outspent, and all the people who have conventional markers of elections, right? Because usually money doesn't buy elections, right? But it's a big part in saying how much resources you have, right? And these people had a ton of resources. But I think what prevailed and made us actually get a lot more votes than some of my competitors was because of 2 things, right? We had a very strong grassroots campaign where we relied solely on volunteers, on passionate community members to not only contribute money, but also contribute their time and their resources and their networks to help this campaign out. So really, every time I talk about our campaign, it's in the terms of us, right? Because it's not just me doing it all. And the second thing is we had a very clear progressive vision that we shared with all the voters and all the families of Assembly District 25. I think that also helps because especially when you have a lot of folks running and they all have different messages, I think it helped by saying our message is very clear. This is what we stand for and this is how we want to do it. And we also were very clear that we didn't take any corporate special interest money at all too. I think that had a large part to play with it where people from either side of the aisle, whether they're Republican or Democrat, empathize with that message, because that's really what we did. We went out, we knocked on doors, went to all the events as much as possible. We talked to people who are either Democrats or who are Democrats, Independents, Republicans, Green Party, Libertarians, everyone. And we just thought, there's always more that unites us than divides us. So we didn't let any letters, next to someone's party define it. So we really, I think, defied a lot of expectations, and we defied the odds when it comes to money, when it comes to professional help that you can buy, and conventional wisdom of electeds, right? Because I was the youngest candidate. Well, I am the youngest candidate. I'm also one of the few candidates who is not elected to office at all. So it's, we had a very big uphill battle, and I'm glad that our clear agenda and our strong grassroots approach made us, be on top of all the other Democrats.
So, yeah, that's impressive. I do have a question, and I kind of always think about this. So, with some of the younger candidates running for a lot of different offices, all the way from AOC to yourself, they mentioned the whole we're not taking special interest corporation money. So, the fact that, your election's not being bought is huge. You're not getting a ton of money to, ensure that you vote a certain way if you get elected. But one question I have is, state legislators, they do have to work with companies. They're there to serve the people, but you do have to work with corporations and companies and such. And so what do you think of the approach? Because, a lot of people do say this, and I think this way a little bit myself. I don't like 100% think this way, but it's a valid point. If a company is giving you some money, they believe in the fact that they'll be able to work with you. Do you think that applies at all? Let me rephrase the question, make it clear. Let's say if Apple were to donate to your campaign, that would show a sign like Apple is willing to work with you if you get elected. Even if they're not asking anything of you, or if you tell them like, hey, just because you're donating, that doesn't mean I'm going to vote in your favor if the time comes, but I will still take your donation. Do you think that just having them show that a sign that they'll work with you, do you think that applies at all in this?
Yeah, so I'll say that I don't believe that any donor of any sort really gives out of just complete generosity. of their heart, especially when it comes to corporations. Yeah.
I donated to a campaign for this 18-year-old kid running for city council in Texas. I have no gain
very good.
whatsoever.
Right. I mean, I think on maybe the individual level, there's that, but when it comes to organizations or companies, that doesn't tend to be the case. It's kind of strategic investment,
Mm-hmm.
And the way I see it is, money is a reflection of your values, right? And it doesn't necessarily, I don't say that every politician who takes money from an Apple or a Google or whatever company means they are a bot, quote unquote, right? But it always infers a relationship. I don't think on either side that it's lost on them that, if one company A gives money to a certain person, it's a reflection of a relationship. I don't think really they just look up people and they're like, all right, time to donate to this person. It's a kind of reflection of a relationship, like I said, right? But that doesn't mean necessarily someone is bought. Now, my policy of why I don't take corporate money at all is because I don't want there to ever be the semblance of bot. I want to be able to make the best decisions based solely on the empirical evidence we have, right? So, and you maybe can feel this maybe in your daily life, but so say a big tech company like Apple or something gives my campaign a bunch of money, and then a vote comes up, right? Or a vote comes up about a privacy issue or a consumer affairs issue or about technology, and I vote a certain way, and that way happens to be in line with that company, with Apple, right? And then money shows up in my account afterwards, right?
Yeah.
You can't, unless you are those two parties, there's no way to exactly know what happened if there's a transaction, but I don't want there to ever be that even doubt of it, right? And then at the same point is I probably am going to vote, obviously, in more in favor of the tech workers and obviously in consumer affairs kind of land. And sometimes I know they aren't too happy about that. And I don't want to navigate that kind of pressure, right? Because I think there's like I said, it's a relationship, right? So if someone is, even in your personal life, if someone gives you $1,000 every month, just because they like you a lot or something, and you had to do something to piss them off, you feel kind of uncomfortable about doing it, right? Even at the very basic human level. So I don't want there to be that even the perception of me working with these big corporations, because in the end, I think my voting record will speak for itself too. When I hopefully get in office, is that it probably won't be on their side all the time too. So I think it's a big reflection, So I just want to be clear about that. When I take money, is like who you basically draw your power from, right? Like if you draw your power from a community, from people who care about these progressive causes I care about, then we're on the same page, right? But I don't want ever to be that question of if a big issue about consumer privacy comes up, right? And Apple is really, really lobbying hard against one way, and say I flip or something, then there's always that possibility of influence, right? And I don't want that influence. In fact, I really think that corporations need to have less influence in our political dynamics. Right now, it's ridiculous how much money people spend, right? From local races to state level, it's like inflated, right? It's like how do people, working class people or young people like you and me, how do we get our foot in the door unless we're like independently wealthy, right? We either have to sell out or we have to be independently wealthy, which both are not ideal and are very exclusive.
That's true. Actually, yeah. On that note, when I ran my campaign for council back in 2018, I got some checks. One of my volunteers picked up some checks from people who were in the housing industry, which surprised me a lot because I had a very hard slow down housing. Do it responsibly, let's put a pause on market rate because we have enough of that already. And so I was very surprised on why I was getting checks from the housing industry. And so before I went and deposited the checks, I went over and I asked them, I had a meeting with them, and I'm just like, so out of curiosity, why are you financially supporting me? That doesn't make a lot of sense. And he's just like, well, us in the housing industry, we're not monsters, we don't want to, destroy the city with just development. And he's like, I personally like your stance on slowing down development. And at the end of the day, regardless of whether I like your stance or not, if development slows down, we have less competition. I'm like, that's interesting. I mean, I see your point.
Rationale.
I see your point, but that's just interesting because, I thought about it later, and I'm just like, that's true. because he already has developments that are already built and have been there since I think 2001.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that is true. If he doesn't plan on developing much, then less development means less competition for him. And so I told him, and I'm just like, if I get into office, if I accept this money and I get into office, there's no favors. I'm not going to lean towards your way at all. I'm going to vote according to the way I do. And he's just like, well, I talked to a former mayor in the city about you, and he kind of told me the same thing. And so I kind of knew that going into this. And I'm like,
that's good. Well, I think that brings up a good point, right? It's like, doesn't always mean they buy their vote or buy something, but but by the same token, right? Me not taking the money doesn't mean I'm not going to work with them at the same time, So I'll still work with the Apples, Googles, housing developers when it makes sense, But I don't want there to be that possibility, right, of exerting the influence, because I really don't believe in that.
So, interesting question. Feel free to not answer this one.
Okay.
But did you get any offers from any corporations for a donation, and did you ever tell them no, or was your message so clear they didn't even try?
Right now, during the primary, no, I did not get any offers from corporations, and I didn't expect it to, because there's a lot of factors. My message, who I am, everything wasn't. I knew that, and at this point, actually, I won't say who, but I did kind of decline money from someone already, which was a very interesting experience to do.
Interesting.
So yes, it's definitely not I'll say in the general term, because I won't say who it is, but it's definitely an interesting experience, right? Because people in politics, especially those who have money and power, are kind of used to politicians being like, they need to just raise as much money as possible, right? They haven't really encountered someone who's like, well, this is kind of antithetical to my beliefs, and I know it would like logically speaking, I know it would benefit my political stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And even sometimes they're like, oh, like no one would even know, right? No one would really care, but I care about it, it matters to me, so I had to turn it down.
Campaign reports are public knowledge.
Yes, of course, but no, they make there's. I really strongly as a person, and I believe there's a lot of people out there that believe in clean campaigns, right? But in reality, right, I'm sure that that person had a good point where it's like, well, no one would really look it up, blah, 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 right? And in reality, sure, that might be the case, but this one person cares a lot, so I would know it. So yeah, so I turned it down. So it's an interesting experience, and having to navigate that, because in politics, people aren't used to that, especially the people who give money, because they see it as a way of opening a door in a sort of way, right? Not necessarily maybe buying your vote, but maybe buying the influence or buying the access, which is unfortunate. But so turning it down was interesting, because I was like, well, doesn't mean we're not going to ever talk. I know where you are, I know what your stances are, and if we come to it, we'll talk. But right now, I think we're kind of on opposite sides of the issue when it comes down to it.
So that's interesting. So you mentioned it was an individual, not like a corporation.
Well, it was an individual representing.
Oh, okay.
So, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Oh man, you're just.
Yeah.
Do you even want money?
No, just no money. I would love that, right? In a case where, this is something I care about too, is getting us to publicly finance elections. Mm-hmm. Where it's really not dependent on that.
Dive into that a little bit, because a lot of people publicly financing elections is, and explain kind of how it would change things a little bit.
Yeah. So when it comes to publicly financed elections, if you think about it, all our elections from president on downwards are all privately run, right? They ask for money from people, from corporations, from unions, from organizations, what have you, and all this private money, amounting to probably billions now at this point, especially in this presidential cycle, right, is just basically, in my opinion, kind of just wasted, just used on stuff for marketing, essentially, right? It's kind of crazy to think about it, right? How much money is used. And if we could say, and we factor in that elections and electing good people is in the public interest, and we use public money to do so, we can get to publicly finance elections, where hopefully that evens the odds.
Public funding as taxpayer money,
yes.
So the states and federally would have an actual budget that they would.
So I remember early on, right? It was Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. I think she had the whole idea, and I think other people copy idea too. The democracy dollars, right? There's several different ways of doing it. There's matching funds, right? There's voucher way, right? So say, Tim, you donate $50 to me, the government matches your $50 contribution to me. So in effect, it doubles your donating power, right? Because especially for those who are disenfranchised in democracy, right? Working class, people of color who do not have a lot of extra cash to just throw at people, right? Can also be more enfranchised in the system, right? So there's different ways of doing it. And there's a lot of different schemes, right?
Well, so I think it was Andrew Yang. He was talking about why you kind of see the same demographic of people running for president every year, and it's because that demographic is the type that can shell out money.
So
and that's a little bit, that could be kind of a controversial topic, and so that wasn't my words, that was Andrew Yang, but that's
I would agree with Andrew Yang. I agree.
Well, so that's interesting because if you were to kind of take that out of play, you might see a much wider, more diverse field of candidates in every race. Because I've ran a campaign, you're running a campaign. We know campaigns are expensive, and anyone who's watching this who doesn't know, campaigns are very expensive.
And money and time and emotion.
It's
everything.
Even my local campaign that I ran was it took up all my time. I worked a full-time job while I was doing my campaign, and so I had no free time. And I raised, I think, not the least amount of money in the race, but I was definitely down there. There's a lot of people who raise a lot more money than me. But even still, it's a lot of money.
Yeah, it is a lot of money.
So that idea of publicly financing the campaigns is very interesting. You would run into a lot of people who would just be angry that you're using taxpayer money to fund someone's campaign. But a different question is, if you were to try and implement that, what would you have like? Would you have like qualifications? Because then, like anyone could just say, hey, I'm running with actual no intention of actually campaigning or anything or actually winning. And then they would just get a bunch of money to just kind of, there's very specific rules on what you have to use campaign finance for. But how would you like avoid waste in there?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good ways to qualify, or and also how to use the publicly financed elections, right? Because there's the voucher system, there's the matching dollars, right? What I talked about. There's a voucher system, which is like a limited amount of money, and every citizen of some municipality can use those democracy dollars, right? So there's different ways of doing these things, but I do believe in yes.
So the voucher system, are you saying, is every registered voter? Because I'm not actually familiar with that type of system. Would that be like every registered voter gets a certain amount that they can give to one candidate? So it's kind of like voting, but with money.
In a way, yes. In a way, I mean, the two are tied, I would say sometimes. But yes, I think I think a city in the Bay Area, I won't say which one, just because I can't remember exactly how it works. I would be embarrassed to get it wrong for them. It does have a system very much like this, where it's like you're allotted amount of monies per person, and then you can use it towards a candidate, right? Or towards a candidate. There's pluses and minuses to all these ways to do it, I think, and trade-offs are something we have to balance.
That's a very interesting concept, and that would be very very.
But how to limit waste, though, I think I have a good idea about that. Is so I'm sure you have to do this for Milpitas. No, it's okay. I'm sure for Milpitas City Council, you have to do something very similar. But you have to collect a certain amount of signatures to even be on the ballot.
Yes.
How many was it for Milpitas?
It's 30.
30? Yeah. So for it's okay. For the state assembly, the minimum I think was like 40, 60 or something like that. But if you did the full amount, you could get rid of there's a fee to be on the ballot. I'm sure there might have been one for you too, but and that was to get 1,000 signatures. And I did that. I got 1,000 signatures, so I didn't have to pay the fee, right? Because we were very tight on money. So that could be a way of doing it, right? Of saying the threshold. If you want to vet out waste and say you're a serious candidate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to get that, you have to qualify the ballot by getting X amount of signatures. We could up the signatures if need be, or you can go for the state level and get your 1,000, right? Because I think very few people actually do the 1,000, and we actually did it. So that could be a system, right, to vet out who's serious about it, and with a real grassroots measurable metric. I don't think it's out of reason to say if you get 30 signatures run for city council, we'll allot you the publicly financed system, whatever it is we have in place, or you triple it, double it, what people think is fair, right?
Yeah.
To be serious, if you got 100 signatures, I would gander in Milpitas, I would gander to say you were serious enough, right? You went out and got 100 signatures from real voters. I think that you're serious. But there's things, we have to strike with the fairness, right? Because my vision and my belief about it is we have to make our system more democratic, lower D, more democratic, and more inclusive, especially of younger people, especially non-traditional candidates, people of color. Because Andrew Yang, I would agree with the Andrew Yang sentiment is like, and from having run a campaign, it's like unless you're independently wealthy, or you have a lot of free time, or both, right? It's very difficult, right? If you're holding down 1 or 2 full-time jobs, you have to take care of a family. Very difficult to do it unless you have, or you sell out, right? That's like, there's no real way. So try to even the odds that way. And publicly financed elections, I think, is one way to really help even those odds.
Well, with both of our brains, I'm pretty sure we could talk about that for hours. Just
for sure.
How would you fund it? Different policies and procedures attached to that. I'm pretty sure we could talk about that for hours. But let's move on. Just
yeah.
And cover a little bit more here. I want to know what your biggest challenges were with getting into the political scene.
Biggest thing, I think. So for my race, right, I had 8 other Democrats. Some of them were elected or had some sort of political office beforehand. And I was the youngest candidate running, the one who didn't have any elected experience. And people, I think, in politics at first would be like, well, why would we believe in you, right? You have no conventional experience, right? But I think you probably share this experience as either a Gen Z or millennial, whoever out there in this period, the whole, the paradox, right? The job paradox, where it's like, every entry level job requires 3 to 5 years experience, right? And you're like, well, how do I get that, right? Same thing. That's how I describe it to young people. It's like the same thing in politics, where people are like, no matter how qualified or educated or how passionate you are about the job, right? People still are like, well, where's your tons of references and where's your 5 years experience? And I think by doing it our way, which is really grassroots, really getting out there to talk to people and showing people I really knew my stuff about the policy issues, because I actually worked in the state assembly and the state senate with a policy background, that I could talk about these issues really, really well in depth and very intellectually, that people start to come around. But definitely there's that initial bias, right, against my age and everything. And it doesn't help that I have an Asian face, so I will look this way until I'm 52. Yeah, I joke with people. I joke with people. It's serious though. Like I have people who are like, "Are you 17? Are you in high school still?" I'm like, "No, I wish I was 17." Sometimes, but like I'm. Yeah, it helps. I think it helps, right?
Same exact.
Right. But people are gonna be like that to us for a long time. And I worked for candidates who were, almost like twice my age. And if they had young faces, people still had that kind of young bias where they're like, "Oh, you're not experienced" or whatever. And for me, it was more like a challenge to overcome, right? Constantly. But our philosophy was always to turn every traditional liability into a strength. So my age, we flipped it into I have a lot of experience for the time. I compressed it all, right? And I also, because I'm not an elected official, if you are angry about anything that exists in our community, well, frankly, it wasn't my fault. So that's an easy one. That's easy. So I'm just like, well, you're angry about Milpitas? Well, truthfully, I didn't have anything to do with it. Or you're like,
that's very interesting because I had kind of the same approach as when I ran my campaign. You know, I was just like, look at how things are. Look at your trash bins. Look at all the housing. Look at all the traffic. Like, no, that was me. But now that I'm the vice chair of the planning commission, I can't really use.
No, you can't do that now.
Because if someone complains about any housing or something, I can just. That was all I can say was that was approved before my time. But that's a lot harder to explain.
Skirting it, than
just straight no.
Yeah.
It can also work into my favor because now, you know, I can say, hey, you know, remember a certain project that everyone hated? You know, I actually voted against it. But because I was only commissioner, I didn't have much power. But that's the type of voting rhetoric. You know, that's my you know,
well, it's important, you know, even if a vote doesn't go your way, I think it's always important to vote your conscience, you know, like I'm sure you share the sense of, but sometimes, you know, you hear people who are like, well, I voted that way because everyone else is voting that way anyway. So, and then like, you know, it doesn't really make sense. Like, why just vote your way if the outcome was going to go that way? So that's why it's important, you know, and people respect that, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah. You know, it's a little bit harder on the planning commission because our votes can't be based off anything personal. It has to be based on the facts and the findings and everything, and so
it's gonna be tough for the wider audience to understand.
And you know, when you know, if we approve something, even if we don't like it, or it's like, well, people aren't gonna like it, but we approve it anyway. You know, it is very hard to explain. Like, no, you don't get it. We have to vote this way because it met all the findings. If you don't like it, you can dispute it. But you know, we have to vote that way, and so. You know, I haven't run into that situation where I had to approve something that a lot of people hated, although every now and then I get stopped in Safeway and asked why I voted a certain way or how I'm voting.
Well, that's good. You're being recognized for your public service.
I actually I went with a friend of mine not too long ago to their car to get cleaned from this guy who has a little car cleaning detailing business. And I've never met the guy at all. Actually, offline, I'll tell you, because you probably know this guy, but he went to MHS.
Oh, okay.
I didn't. He was in MHS when I was out. I knew nothing about him. I didn't know him at all.
Okay,
but
tell me after.
Yeah, when he saw me, he's like, "Oh, what's your name?" And I'm like, "Tim." He's like, "Oh, Tim Alcorn?" And I'm like, "Yes." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, you're involved with Milpitas politics and all that, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, yeah, you know, I don't know you, but I caught wind of you, you know, just with all the political stuff and all that." I'm like, "Oh, you know, I get recognized," but that was a weird time to get recognized because I just was not expecting that at all.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, you probably, I'll tell you offline. You probably know him.
Probably.
I'm not gonna say his name over the.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna blast him too much, but. No, that was interesting.
You don't want to give free advertising to the car cleaning service?
I mean, I would want his permission first, but he did a pretty good job. If anyone can track down who that is, go hire him because he does really great work.
Anyway. It's an incognito review right here.
Right. So age, basically, in a very short answer, age is your obstacle. You know, I kind of got that too. I had a very interesting advantage when I was running, though, is because although I was very young, I was living in Milpitas for over 20 years.
Yes.
So, even though I was half the age of the people who would be, some of the people who'd be voting for me, I lived in Milpitas twice as long as they have. And so that kind of, and so
so there was this little joke that I would say with my team is like sometimes in our debates someone would say the same thing where they're like, I've lived in the district 25 years or something, and I would say, oh, me too. I mean, yeah, it's true. Me too.
You're not quite 25 years for you.
No, but you close enough, right? It's similar enough.
I think I'm about 6 months away or so of 25 years in Milpitas.
6 months from now, your birthday? So
I'm 25, but I moved here when I was 1.
Oh, okay. You know what? No one's gonna fact check that. Just go with it. Just go with it.
Funny, every time I say I've been in Milpitas for 25 years and my dad's around, he goes, "Not yet." He makes sure I
really, really. Wow,
Funny.
it's intense.
So when it comes to, you kind of touched on this a little bit already, but what makes you qualified for this job? You kind of touched on how you worked for this. And what exactly was your title?
Yeah, so I think I am uniquely qualified in two ways to be in the state assembly. One is I was legislative staff in the state assembly and the state senate. I'm a legislative policy advisor is the title I use in various regards. So in the Capitol, I did things like I would help literally write the bills that got passed, or I would help recommend votes for those bills. Mm-hmm. And in the assembly, I was in the district level, which is so every just for some context, right? So just like Congress, there's districts, right, across the California. And I'm running for Assembly District 25, but I worked for Assembly District 28 in the field office, which is back down in the South Bay. And I did a lot of work with neighborhood groups, a lot of organizations that are South Bay based, and we work together on a lot of issues, especially on like public safety and stuff like that. And kind of work that way through, right? So you're probably familiar, and hopefully most people in the audience know that every politician and legislator, they have like a cadre of people behind them, right? Their team, their staff, right? And they do all sorts of things. And so my function was a lot of times helping advise on the types of policies they should be advocating for, or should be passing, and that made me really uniquely qualified because I think of the people to go work at some place, you want someone who has prior experience, right? And the closest thing you can get to being a state legislator is working for them, frankly speaking, And I've always said this is like, I didn't want to run for city council or school board because I don't know how a city council or school board works. I have no idea. I don't feel qualified, So it's obviously a very valid experience to transition to different levels of government, but it's not the same. School board is unique. I would say if I became a state assembly member and I was like, I'm going to run for school board, it's a quite transition, right? It's not like one enables you to do the other. Yeah. So that's my top, I think, qualification, the direct job experience. To kind of go back to our job allegory. But the second thing is also, I believe I'm the only candidate to have grown up and lived in this district basically my whole life. Joke about the 25 years thing, but I grew up in this area. I know it really well because it's my home community, and I think it also showed in the election results is that I did really well, especially in the parts of town I lived in and grew up in, like Berryessa and Milpitas. I did pretty well, like especially good at those ones, and I think it shows.
Well, you got the Milpitas high vote, didn't you?
The Trojans.
I have an MHS scarf around here somewhere.
I don't even have one of those.
What?
I don't know how people get those. Wait, how did you get it? Where'd you get it from?
Oh, I'm about to slam you right now. Just be ready. You show up to Milpitas events. I'm kidding. I'm giving you a hard time.
Okay, wait. Hey, here's the thing. Did you get it during high school or after?
I got it at a Milpitas event after. No, these are like...
I got you.
These were made. The scarf I have, it was made to fund, I think, the soccer team at Milpitas. Milpitas.
But after we were in school.
Yeah. This was like.
So here's my thing. I thought this was a thing we had during school. And I was like, wait a second, I never saw any.
No, I was talking about.
That's my defense.
Showing.
Yes.
Events, yes. Man.
Yes.
I'm just giving you a hard time.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, I'll be going to a lot more events, hopefully, with. When events happen again. Yes, events happen again.
I got that one at the parade for the football team. I was actually one of the drivers in the parade.
Nice.
And so I went and I got it. They're selling them there. I got it to support the soccer team there, which I'm pretty sure it was a soccer team. I'm pretty sure.
Well, I got a lot of UC Davis stuff. I did a lot of that hoorah cheering.
No one cares about it. I'm just kidding.
Well, you know what? Probably like a third of MHS graduates end up at Davis. So
that's true. I know
it's one of the biggest feeder ones.
I know of quite a few actually.
Yes.
Well, that is definitely a good skill set to make you qualified. So when it comes to campaigning, at least, what do you think your campaign's going to look like over the next 2 months? And at least because, we're shelter in place, campaigns aren't an essential business. And so, so, and it's going to last, our shelter in place order will end April 7th, but I'm almost positive it's going to get extended.
Right now the statewide shelter in place order is until further notice. Right now, there's no real definite time on it. Yeah,
and
the Bay Area we had until April, the first week of April, and then the state went just foreseeable future, which I think is the right call, honestly.
Yeah.
We can go into my thoughts about coronavirus and how we should handle that situation later, but so I personally and our campaign, we are basically thinking about how this is going to go all the way until fall, essentially. I mean, one way or another, I don't think things are going to be quote unquote normal until maybe the end of this year, honestly, because there's going to be a lot of adaptation one way or the other, right? If it's not this quarantine mode, it's going to be something else entirely, So I don't envy people who are in the position of having primary elections coming up. There's still, it's crazy to think there's still primary elections happening right now. New York, which is suffering a lot, they have their primary in June, so they still have a little while. But so I don't envy in their position, but for the time being, we are suspending doing any door knocking, frankly, more out of precaution of our residents more than anything, I think. I don't necessarily think the people that are home will transmit to us. It's more I worry is, a walker could transmit because you're talking to so many people, and I don't want that risk for anyone, even though I'm sure people are plenty nice and would open and still talk to us to this day, because that's our character of our community, right? I just don't want that exposure level. So we're not going to do that. We're looking more at how everyone else is adapting, frankly, and we're going to probably focus more on remote campaigning, things like text, phone banking, that kind of stuff. Which will be hard because our main staple was getting out there in the field and being out there in person. So we'll adapt, I think. But there's plenty of repercussions of Corona that will have to be addressed and people want answers to. So we're also shifting into a mode of being like a public information dissemination too. And I think people frankly need that. And I think that takes precedence over any sort of political campaigning, frankly, especially for the next coming 4-7 weeks. I think things
Bernie Sanders is doing right now.
Yes.
I think he diverted all of his donations to different organizations that are fighting. Yeah, which is
Bernie raised like $2 million, I think, for a bunch of organizations in the last couple of weeks or something. Yeah. I think that's what we need. We need to pull together and say, beyond just suspending our campaigns, we need to use those campaigns as pulpits for good. And that's where we have to see, what's appropriate, right? Because I don't want to make things look like a political stunt, right? You want to help people to help people, and I'm always very cognizant of that.
I don't want to make it look like it. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
No, they're not for me.
Well, no, I can see, you genuinely just want to help as many people as you can. This is not our first time talking. We've chatted before, and I can kind of see that's your intention. And honestly, that should be the intention of anyone who's running. I personally don't think that if you're running just because you want the power, or I was gonna say the paycheck, but that job doesn't pay that well. You can make a living, but
fun fact, the state legislature is forbidden to get a pension, so I won't get a pension from my work in the legislature.
I did not know that.
It was a thing they changed when they had term limits,
because the salary is $104,000, correct, per year,
something like that.
It's I think it's very close to there, which, don't get me wrong, that's not a small amount of money.
No,
but considering you have to live in this district, it's not like you'll be loaded and rich.
I mean, to you and me, that sounds like a great amount of money to have, because it's more money than we've made, and I've always had the philosophy, it's like, well, if someone takes a pay cut to run for public office, I think that's already a red flag. So, I mean, most of these people who run for these offices aren't relying on that salary alone. They already have they're already as well off-ish.
Let me comment on what you just said. If someone takes a pay cut to go into office, you see it as a red flag.
Somewhat of it. I'm not saying that's like the end all be all, but
in some circumstances that could be like like a waving green flag. If you're willing,
It depends on the level of
the context, because
the context, right?
Because you want to help people, and that you can help most people that way, then
Well, I think the context is very different from like a part-time, like city council is, which part-time, right? But it's part-time kind of salary, like versus a full-time salary, right? Yeah. exactly. But there's a huge difference in that regard. I'm saying more so in these jobs where it's expected you're like full-time, it's a little different. So yeah, that's a good clarification. But I mean, sometimes I mean it only half just, but because my goal obviously is to get more people of different backgrounds to run, right? And if you're already independently wealthy, or you have a comfy job where you make a lot of money already, I've heard it before where people would say they complain about taking a pay cut being a state legislator. And I'm like, and you and me are like, wow, $100K? That sounds pretty good still. That's pretty good. I think that's like, it's different mentality, right? Because if you and I go into public office and we make $100K, we must have a total different economic outlook on life than people that go downwards, right? I see it from that standpoint, although it can be good. I think their context is important, right? But I think that economic outlook is important when it comes to policymaking.
That's true. I don't even remember where we left off.
We're jumping all over the place.
Yeah, I know. That's good. That's good. I'm pretty sure me and you could talk for hours.
Oh, sure.
So let's just cap that one off, and let's go. Can you explain your top priorities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, top priorities.
How many are there? Because that's always an interesting question. How many priorities do you have? And can you explain them? I'll run a campaign. That's interesting to me.
Yes, I'll boil it down to my top 3, and then I'll also adapt. I'll also adapt to you in my personal prediction of the post-corona environment, what's going to happen, how those will change, and we're going to change our messaging a little bit too. But the top 3 for me is that fix the housing crisis, reinvest in education, and the third one is to rebalance our democracy, which is about campaign finance reform. So I will say, in light of what will, I think, likely happen post-corona, is that we are going to enter a recession of some scale. It's unarguable. I'm sure you already know, like, businesses are shuttering, like small businesses are actually closing. Mm-hmm. They're out of business, and a lot of people are hurting in this economy. And I don't think that the last, it's kind of strange to think that the last decade plus of unprecedented economic growth is defeated because of pandemic, not because it's just economic bubble, right? Which we all thought was going to happen anyways. It's a pandemic that speeds it up, right? So in that light, I think it's more important now that we fix our democratic system to make sure that more people who are not just of the usual background or independent wealth can serve and make policy for the future, right? In our recovery mode, right? And also why the housing crisis becomes so important now is because, in addition to people struggling to pay rent or buy a home, now you're in the problem of, if people are all laid off, all their businesses are closed, how do they keep what they have? And that's going to be so important moving forward. So my goal, or get it back, right? So my goal before was to make sure that every person was able to afford a new home, or move, change their situations. And that was going to involve building more affordable housing, which I still believe should be part of the platform, part of our policy. That may be scaled back given the economic situation, right? I think that's just naturally how it should be and how it will be, but now it'll be more so in preservation, right? Because when you talk about housing production, there's the 3 Ps, right? There's production, which you and I could talk on forever because of urban planning, right? But now we're in protection and preservation mode, where we got to preserve the affordable housing and protect people from losing their homes, which is an unfortunate kind of defense mode. So I'll be pursuing programs, hopefully, and policies to make sure that people aren't kicked out. Like right now, I think the other day, I went on the record and supported like over 200 organizations that wrote to Governor Newsom, because right now, really the executive branch is in charge of the show, to say that we should have statewide eviction moratorium, statewide rent suspension. I think that should also apply to commercial properties too, but this one is focused obviously on housing. To just say, like, during a pandemic, the easiest thing to do right now is literally stay at home, right? But if you have no home to stay at, it worsens both all ends of the spectrum, the economic situation, the public health situation, the housing situation. So right now I'm going to be playing a lot of defense on that and making sure people aren't losing their homes during one of the worst global health pandemics.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third thing, which is about reinvesting education. So I'm sure as a Milpetian, you know how important it is our public schools are stay strong and how we need to have more access for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I always believe that the state should have invested more. We only, last budget, we only invested at the pre-recession, the pre-2008 recession level of funding. So we still had a whole decade of funding to catch up on. The tricky part now is if we're in economic contraction is I will be very strong about defending the budget we have, right? Because you and I are alive long enough to remember what it was like to see colleges, public schools get all their budget just slashed during the last recession, right? Yeah. So I don't want us to get to that point. You know, we have to dip into a rainy day reserve. We have to hold the line and say, these are some programs we should not be cutting at all. At all. You know, like the number one thing we know that improves people's socioeconomic outcomes, not overnight, but over time, right, is education. And if you cut that during another global depression, a global recession, just boggles my mind. So it'll be very important for me now to play defense on that as well. So as a progressive, you know, like I champion a lot of things about expanding our programs and growing our tax base because we had a lot of expansionary opportunities. Frankly, I was out. I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot too. No, but frankly, I was on the campaign trail saying like we need to have these tough decisions now because we are in economic growth. Because it is going to be really, really effing hard to do when we were in a recession. And guess what? We're now suddenly in a recession. So you know that's a tough job that I hope I might be in that position, right? So I'm going to play hard on those things and say, like, we have to still prioritize these things. We can't just give up like we did last time and hurt. You know, like the only reason I think we pulled through is a lot of luck, honestly. Like the way our economy in California just restructured in the United States, like we can't go down austerity. Like I'm going to be very against austerity, and that might be the fight that I have, you know, in my first term.
Well, yeah, you know, California, we're being hit really hard, but we are pretty fortunate just because of the budget surplus that we currently are sitting on right now.
Yeah,
it's kind of.
We built a reserve.
Yeah, and you know, Gavin Newsom can kind of throw money at certain things and not have to worry about where it's going to come from. Although I don't know if you were listening to his address today. You know, they're talking about unemployment and you know where the funding is going to come from and is it going to put us into more debt and I'm not going to repeat his words because I'll probably say something wrong, but it's very interesting. We are very fortunate. There's a lot of states who aren't as as we are.
They don't have a rainy day fund like we do.
Yeah, exactly. But you know,
the reserve is limited, though. It's going to be limited, and I acknowledge that.
Well, yeah, you know, in a situation like this, especially with a lot of the stimulus packages that they're talking about, you know, let's say you have $16 billion, that can go in a day.
Yeah.
And so you know, it's a lot of money, but you know, you're dealing with a lot of people, and that can go in just like a day. I think it's related to this. I think it's kind of crazy, and I want your take on this. That you know, you mentioned small businesses are just closing up. They're firing or laying off their staff, and they're closing up, which is understandable. You know, there's a certain type of business insurance you can get that basically gives you some funds during times like this. I think it's business interruption insurance. But it's very known to be extremely not reliable. There's this computer repair tech who has a YouTube channel, and he kind of explains his business and all that. But his name is Louis Rossmann. He's based in New York, and there's a hurricane near his shop, and it wiped out a power plant that supplied power to his shop. Not a single drop of water got into his shop. He was completely untouched, very dry, but he had no power. And so he couldn't operate because he had no power. And so he tried to make a claim, and they're just like, oh, sorry, we don't cover water damage. You have to get flood insurance. he's like, no, you don't understand. My power's out. Like, I have no water damage at all. I don't need any repairs. It's just my power's out, so I can't operate. And they're just like, yeah, but it was caused by a hurricane, so only flood insurance will cover it. And so it's known to be very unreliable. But what is kind of boggling my mind right now is that there are a lot of very large companies, and this is happening right here in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of large companies that are talking about restructuring.
Yeah.
And either restructuring or just flat out saying layoffs. And that is kind of crazy to me because they, you would think they have the funds to kind of get through this and and you think their insurance policies would be insane, because they probably have some sort of business insurance as well, but on a larger scale. And so, let's say you get elected and, the economy is starting to climb back to where it was after the election. How would you kind of handle those companies who decided to just think about their own money instead of their own employees and just do massive rounds of layoff? How would you kind of handle that?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be, I think, a tough economic situation that a lot of companies are going to put in, right? I think it's not within our economic system. It is almost predictable that if there's economic contraction, they will start laying off people. I think in a kind of silver linings way, right, we see what industries are essential, what aren't. It's usually the jobs that weren't seen as the most glamorous or the most high paid, but they're probably the most stable right now, at least speaking, right? So definitely these companies are going to cut. I think it's going to remains to be seen what will happen at the federal level, right? Are we going to see another 2009 style bailout of the big companies where we inject the money in the companies and we hope they do the best? Or more so in my line of thinking, hopefully we inject the money towards the American people, and really place our bets on the people, right? Not just the companies. Because in the end, you're right. It's like these companies can climb back, but they don't have to hire all these people back. They don't have to re-employ people, right? And
if you're familiar with, and I'm sure you are, if you're familiar with the corporate world, something like this could totally, let's say, I don't want to get sued, so I'm not going to use an actual company name, but let's say a very large tech company, they're already known for doing stuff like this. The employees that have been there for 10 years, they're making tons of money because they've been there for so long. You have their pensions to think about. This particular company is already known for getting rid of those people who've been here 10 years, because if you get rid of one person, his salary can cover 3 new hires who are younger, who are glad to make, $80,000 a year.
Especially in a tight job market, right?
Yeah. And I think technically that's illegal, but, they just have, as soon as they get profit, dips in profit, they can justify mass layoffs, and it just so happens to be the people who've been there for a really long time. And then when they start seeing profit rise again, they start hiring, and it's kind of their way of filtering, keeping the average time you work there to 3 to 5 years. And so there's a lot of companies who can actually gain from this pandemic, which is kind of sickening if you really think about it, because now they have a great excuse to lay off a ton of people. And then just when the time comes where, they're back in full operation, they can just hire new people and pay them less and all that. But I don't expect a full-on answer because
I think we're thinking of a similar company in mind.
Yeah, I think we are.
The one specific one. We won't say it now, but I think we're thinking of the same one.
Yeah, I'll chat with you offline about that because I do not want to get sued.
Yes.
But I don't expect anyone to have a real clear answer about that yet, because we honestly don't know what it's going to look like. I'm sure there's a few, but I don't think there's any major company who's publicly announced massive layoffs yet.
Oh, of course, they're not going to publicly announce that right now. No.
Yeah. I've heard rumors about in-staff memos and stuff saying this may happen, it may not, but if Apple were to lay off a bunch of people, it would be huge.
I think it's expected. It should be expected.
Actually, I thought that a little bit of humor. I thought it was kind of funny. I posted this on Twitter a long time ago, and I didn't realize how funny the tweet was until later. But everyone's just like, what am I going to do about money? What am I going to do about my family? What am I going to do about getting sick? And then you have Apple is like, we have a new iPad. It was just a very weird
solution for all of them.
Yeah, it was just a very weird time to have a new product announcement and everything, and even movies are being pushed back, and Apple's just like, we have a new iPad. But also they've been kind of doing a lot to help out and do their part.
Yeah,
which is good.
Well, I think hopefully this is the silver lining, right? And I think this hopefully will guide us in policy making post pandemic. Is that I think this pandemic has shown us a lot of things, hopefully awakened the American public to a lot of new realities, right? Mm-hmm. It's shown us what is essential. And if those things are essential, should we be valuing them better with living wages, with better worker protections, right? Should the tech workers, and I do believe this, tech workers have better labor protections in the form of maybe unionization, because that was also one thing to help curb mass firing and mass layoffs, right? Mm-hmm. How much of your work can actually be done remotely, right? How much of our carbon footprint is done via just driving around? And, how important is childcare and all these things, these programs, right? Now that I think obviously a big portion of our population is already having to rely on these safety nets, but now you've got basically everyone trying to figure out the safety net. Like, what is the role of government in emergencies? What is the social safety net? What is my labor safety net, right? And I'm hoping that people come away with this by saying, wow, the safety net has a lot of holes in it, and it's not very good. We should do our best to make sure it's fixed and everyone has these benefits, right? Mm-hmm. The crazy thing about how now everyone's talking about some form of UBI, right? Universal basic income, about giving people $1,000, $2,000, whatever it is. But
Andrew Yang's over there like, I told you.
I told you, yeah, exactly, right? So, but I mean, like 3 months ago, everyone over there said that's like, it's crazy, right? That's a crazy idea, right? Mm-hmm. But given the right context and the right things, people I think can reevaluate these programs, and I think there's that room for it. So I hope that with that new consciousness, we are now saying, we need real structural change, right? We have to be able to provide for our families and work, with dignity and with safety. And it's ridiculous that it took a pandemic to tell us, wow, all this stuff wasn't there. So let's fix it for the next one, right? And so that's going to be part of my job, is to really advocate and say, like, we learned a lot of vital lessons here, all about essentials of life and essentials of our economy. So let's value those things as they are essential instead.
That's true. Actually, I think another silver lining to add to what you're saying is we're seeing people work together who I don't think have ever really worked together. And, I remember me and you were old enough to... Yeah, me and you are... me and you were old enough to remember, not fully, but the effect that 9/11 had on the country.
Oh, yeah.
And, we were both very young. So we didn't understand the full weight of exactly what was happening. Yeah. But, you saw people work together. You saw the whole U.S. united for the first time in a while. And, I realized this today. It's, I heard Gavin Newsom thanking President Trump and his administration, I think for the first time ever. Today. It's the first time I've heard it. And, because the last major incident in California where Trump was actually here and helping out with us was some of the fires that were happening in LA and
Paradise.
Yeah, and he wasn't even the governor yet. He was elected at that point, but he didn't.
Well, he's still lieutenant governor.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he was still lieutenant governor, but it is interesting. It's people are working together now, and these people have never wanted to work together or never worked together before. And I think I'm very much hoping that after this, people are going to realize okay, we have our differences, but we can work together.
I hope so.
Because, when it comes to my political views, I definitely lean more towards the Democrat side, but, I'm not a full-on Democrat. A lot of people think I am. I'm not a full-on Democrat because, what the Republican Party stands for, I agree with a lot of with a lot of that stuff. And a lot of what Democrats stand for, I agree with a lot of that. And so I'm not quite a moderate, like kind of right in the middle, but, I have I see a lot of value in some of the stuff Republicans believe in. And when I'm standing as an outsider looking in, I'm just like, dude, if these two parties could just work together, we could get so much done and just have a little bit of this and a little bit of, that, from different perspectives. And I think it was Barack Obama who had the quote, "Don't let the good be the enemy of the perfect," or "Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good." One of those. Basically saying like, look, let's work together. Let's get a bill passed. It may not be 100% what you wanted, but it's better than not having a bill at all. And actually, we're seeing that right now with this stimulus package that failed in the Senate, I think yesterday, because it didn't have everything that every single person wanted. But the thing is like right now, I think a lot of people are struggling, and we kind of need something right now, even if it's not completely. I don't know what's your views on that. We could, that's another thing we could probably talk about for hours on end. But
sure,
it would just be. I'm really hoping that people come out of this and they're just kind of able to work with each other and understand that that bill might not have 100% of what you want on it, but it still can do a lot of good. And it may not be 100% to your views, but just because you don't agree with something doesn't specifically mean it's wrong in some cases. There's a lot of craziness going on right now, so I'm not going to apply that to everyone. But in some cases, just because you don't agree with something doesn't mean it's wrong, because another person's point of view, it's right, and they don't agree with the part that you think is right. And I'm just really hoping that, there's a lot of, there's people who will see value in reaching across the aisle. And
well, I hope so. Across the aisle, across different levels of society and government. That's the hope, right? I think that's the only way we're going to pull through this next one, or else, it's going to get worse.
Yeah.
That's my hope.
I mean, this pandemic we're experiencing right now is going to change the country pretty much forever. A lot of people are saying, when we go back to normal, we're not going back to normal. That's not going to happen.
There'll be a new normal.
We'll have a new normal, but we're not going back to the way we were pre-pandemic. That's not going to happen.
I don't think so.
And part of me is actually legitimately a little freaked out. But as humans, we're sometimes afraid of change, so that's probably what it is. But part of me is actually really excited for it, to see kind of where we're going. And kind of, there's a great segue. Where do you see yourself in the future, when you moved on from, this endeavor, if you get elected, after out, or like just way in the future, when you're 30 or 40.
30 or 40. Well, I hope the voters of our district will trust me enough to be their representative for the full 12 years term limits, which I can have. So it's 6 elections, but so every 2 years. And by then I will be the ripe old age of 37 years old. So I don't think, I think I'm very turned off. I mean, unless things drastically improve in the federal level, I would never want to go to DC. You can record me now saying that. I don't know what's going to happen, but, I really want to give it my all. I realize sometimes it's a trade-off between doing really well in office versus your advancement in career. And I'm fully ready to accept that I will not advance if I do the right things, right? If I go down pissing off all the right people because I voted the way I wanted and made the policy I think that was best for Californians, so be it. I won't advance any further. I won't run for Congress or governor or whatever. That's fine. If not, then I will switch my career trajectory. And I don't know. I mean, I always liked other things. Like I thought about, being a zookeeper or something. That'd be cool.
Hey, what?
A zookeeper.
That's so random.
Yeah, so different, right? But I don't know. I just there's a lot of things I like to experience and do. And the kind of nice thing about the legislature is your job is basically the people's business, right? Which is everything. So I can mold myself into becoming a wine expert if I had to be, right? Make wine policy or clean energy or housing policy or things about endangered species. I don't know. So it's like I have a great way to figure out what it is in life I want to keep working on after that. So my goal will always be to help people and help causes, and it doesn't always have to be in politics.
Well, that's actually a very great answer.
This is the truth.
It's funny. You said you never really want to be down in DC. I was in DC in November.
Yes.
And I felt, and don't take this a weird way, like I want to be a career politician over and it, but I felt drawn to DC. I'm just like, this is the madness I want.
You had the madness. Oh
yeah,
no!
It's so chaotic and it's so fast paced, and I'm just like, something about this is super exciting. You know, I got a tour of the Capitol building, and you know, it was a private tour, which was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Got to go into the tunnels and everything,
Cool.
the staffing tunnels and all that. I saw Nancy. I didn't see the inside, but I saw Nancy Pelosi's office. What's crazy is I realized that she was in her office when I passed by her door, because as I left the Capitol, I was walking by the Supreme Court, and then he pulls up in front of the Supreme Court and gets out because the Supreme Court was ruling on DACA, and there's a lot of protesters outside, and she went out to meet with the protesters, and I'm just like 20 feet away watching, and I'm just like, did that just happen?
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy.
Well, you know what? One day I'll take you to Sacramento when the legislature is in session. There is enough chaos there that it almost repulses me. So let's see how that chaos treats you.
I don't know. I don't know why, and I hope if I'm ever in the situation, I won't contribute. But something about political chaos is just so interesting to me. It's like,
yeah. Depends if it's a good chaos or not.
Yeah. You know, because you have
Lawful chaos
politics. Well, you have petty politics, and that chaos is like, I thought the whole time, like you're thinking, like, I thought we moved past this type of arguing like after high school, and then you have like the just craziness where it's just like you don't have a time to think. You know, it's everything's just moving so quick. And yeah, I do not like petty politics. I think I'm so done and tired of that. But
I am too.
In California, we've seen plenty of that, and even California,
every level,
like nationally, it's kind of crazy. You know, just like the back and forth between Newsom and Trump for a while. It's just like, we're going to deal with this the way we see fit. And then Trump's like, well, fine, we're going to cut off all your funding. And then he's just like, we'll be fine, but please don't do that. And then it just, yeah, it's kind of crazy.
It's childish.
Well, anyways, that's all I had prepared.
Awesome.
And it's been well over an hour.
Yeah, it's almost 7. Yeah, well, I enjoyed our conversation, Tim, as always. Looking forward to meeting you up in real person eventually and being on the podcast.
Yeah, eventually. Whenever this is done, I'm going to get that fired.
When we have a new normal.
Hopefully I still have a film studio at that time. You never know what's going to go on. All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.